All right, so we are ready to get started with another exciting webinar from Praise Charts, and today we've got Andi Rozier. Is it Rozier? Is that how we pronounce your last name?
It's however you want to say it. Everybody says it differently, so
well,
sounds good. Sounds good to me.
How do I say it with like a UK accent?
Rozier.
Rozier. Oh, Rozier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome here, Andi, and I'm very excited to be talking with you today. I think you're calling in from Chicago, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Right on. Now, I'm just getting word that Charlene's telling me your voice is peaking out a little bit, so I don't know if you can pull just a little bit away to your phone.
I can.
Just so you don't, okay, perfect.
Sure.
Awesome. Right on. Well, we got lots of people listening in and eager to hear about your church and learn a little about your life and your story and this great new album that has come out from your church, which I know is inspiring and encouraging a lot of people already. So, and I've never talked to you. Just for people listening in, this is actually my first time getting to talk to you. Some of the people from our Praise Charts team have gotten to know you and have raved about you and your story and your ministry. So they're like, Ryan, you're going to have such a good time with Andi on the phone. So there's so many places we can begin, but, maybe we should just start by you just telling us a little bit about, this whole vertical church thing. That's what we're hearing so much about this in the last couple of weeks since this album has come out. And
sure.
I know it's not new to you, but to the rest of us, we're like, well, what is this all about? So just give us a little broad overview of what this vertical church thing is.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the concept of vertical has been around at our church, which is Harvest Bible Chapel. We're based in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And as you can tell, I'm not from Chicago. I'm originally from London. I came over here about 11 years ago now to work for Harvest, and I've been on the worship ministry ever since. And as soon as I came to Harvest, like our senior pastor, James McDonald, so I'll just refer to him as James, was kind of throwing this concept around of us getting vertical in worship, in our church culture, and even to the point that I think it was 2003 we started hosting a conference called Straight Up Conference. There was always this concept of vertical going around. Well, about 2 years ago, James gathered a number of the senior pastors from the other Harvest Bible chapels that we've started over the last 10 or 11 years, and got them together and said, hey, I think it's time to kind of start writing this down, to start writing what a vertical church looks like, where the concept is, taking our eyes off of horizontal, helpful church and gathering people to a life-altering, what we would call an earth-shattering, window-rattling, life-altering experience every weekend, every time people come into our doors, where the glory of God is made manifest here, and our lives are changing, mountains are moving, and so the album, was a product of that being talked about in our church. James is now starting to kind of write this down, so we're starting to write towards it too. And this isn't new for us either. Like a number of years ago, James preached a series in our church called Downpour, which was about personal revival. And we at that time wrote a whole record for that series too. And we went out on the road and we did some big arena events where a number of people, James, Beth Moore, Crawford Loritz, preached on this Downpour series, and we were the worship team, and we were singing these songs that we specifically wrote for the Downpour series. So, we're at Harvest Bible Chapel, where vertical church is a concept that any church can get on board with, and And I would strongly encourage anybody just to grab James's book and to read through that. And we've been out on the road for the last couple of months. The team is just finishing up a 40-city tour that we've been doing.
Wow.
I think tomorrow night might be the last night. But I got back on Monday and I did 21 of the events, and it's really just in summarize, just to stand on stage and see people come in every night to, okay, so I'm hearing James, and I know him from Walk in the Word, his preaching ministry, and I know Harvest Bible Chapel, and now there's this thing, Vertical Church, and to hear that get unpacked and through God's Word, and at the end of the night, see people so changed and fired up by the power of God's Word to go back to their churches and to seek out in their churches the manifest glory of God, like God changing lives, not just us turning up at church, kind of checking the check mark every weekend, but us really seeking passionately and fervently after the glory of God. Because when the glory of God is made manifest in our churches, that's when lives are changed, and that's when mountains are moved, and so that's Vertical Church.
It's just thinking it. What makes me so excited and committed to what we're doing in Praise Charts is providing, with all the resources that we do towards this end. But it really takes, the songwriting and the music providing and all of that, and then it's like a marriage with this message that you're saying of connecting, with that life-changing power of Christ. Right. And it's so worth it to dedicate our lives to this ministry. Like, this is where it's at. Hey, is just being transformed in God's presence. And you guys are really bringing that message. Do you feel like is it people who are hearing this, like, is it a new message for people, or do you feel like a lot of the church has forgotten this or been perhaps misguided or have our priorities or our focus been shifted a little bit? Is that where this is coming out of? I think exactly what you said. I don't think it's a message that's been preached right out of Scripture, so it's not a new message. It's something that God has been saying to the church for thousands of years. But yes, I do think that I feel really convicted in my spirit, even attending the church that James pastors. Yes, this is something that we've lost sight of. Yes, this is something where, as a worship leader, how I would apply that as a worship leader and someone who plans worship services is often we become way more forms-based instead of foundation-based. And let me just unpack that. If the foundation of our worshiping God is John 4:24, to worship Him in spirit and truth, and often we go into a service. I've told a bunch of people this. That I find the hardest weekend in our church to be the weekend after Easter. Because at Easter it's it's the biggest weekend really of the Christian year, right? It's like we're celebrating, we're pulling out everything we have. At Harvest here on our campuses, we even bring in like confetti cannons, which is crazy. But we blow there's this one point in the service where we. James gets up on stage and he says, "Christ is risen," and everybody cheers, and we shoot these confetti cannons into the air, and we have our orchestra on stage, and we have our choir on stage. Well, then those are all forms. They're all forms of worship. And the following weekend, it's very easy for the worship leader to get up and be like, "Great, now what do I do?" Yeah, who wants to follow that?
Right, exactly. And that's where we've become event planners instead of pastors. That's where that's where we've lost sight of what we're really doing, and we've become indoctrinated to bigger is better, and that's not vertical church. Vertical church is getting back to the foundation and saying, hey, we don't need forms. I mean, they're helpful, and we use them because God is Creator God, who created us to be creative. He wants us to be creative in our worship services. But He doesn't want us to put the weight as worship planners on the forms of our worship service instead of the foundation of our worship service, which is going after God, seeking His glory to come down, getting behind our senior pastor as he preaches the unapologetic truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ every weekend. So that's how it looks for us, or for me as a worship leader.
I wonder if what's happened in the last, say, 20 years of the church in the dawn of technology and, lights and sound and media, and it's almost been like this playground of exploration that, we have to explore, all the different, what you're calling as forms, but it's created this whole nether level to what church can be, and churches start looking at other churches and, we got to make this better and that better. And maybe that's why this ministry that you're having now is so timely. It comes in, now we're 20, 25 years into the real, dawn of technology in our lives and in the church. And we need this reminder, like, don't get lost in that form world and, almost assume that that's going to bring us into the presence of God,
Amen.
I know, like, I'm personally going to a church right now, and, it's a small church in a very unappealing kind of building, and there's no lights and massive sound and all of that, but it's, they're just going after the presence of God, and almost antithetical to, we don't want any of the other stuff. And I don't know that that's the answer necessarily, but certainly we do need this reminder of what it's all really for. Yeah. And I can see from even the picture I'm looking at, obviously there's big sound, big lights, big production, and confetti cannons in your ministry. So it's not like you guys are turning a shoulder to
but that's not a regular weekend, and we're doing it we'll only do that on Easter weekend because we're trying to use our forms to reflect a picture of, like, Christ is risen. This is the weekend that we celebrate that, but we don't rely on those things. We don't get to a point where we feel like, well, because we did that, now what are we going to do? And if you're going, Ryan, it sounds awesome about your church, and the people are passionately and fervently going after God and seeking Him every weekend, and if lives are being changed at your church, and people are getting saved and baptized, that's the picture of a healthy church. That's the picture. Yeah. And that's what we're seeking after. Seeking after not our churches being helpful churches where they're just kind of like social clubs that people come to, and not only do they check the check mark, but, well, I learned a few things about how to balance my checkbook today. No, that's good. That's good stuff to know biblical principles about. But when we gather together as a body of believers, let's be going after God. Let's be going after change lives, like real heart change, real transformations, real salvation. So I can get way more passionate about it. I might be screaming down.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want you to peek your phone there, because other people would be screeching. I know that one of the unique and very focused passions that you have personally and in your ministry is this whole aspect of mentoring other worship leaders. And I want to transition a little bit to that, because obviously I'm thinking that in your mentoring other worship leaders, you're all about, how can we pass this idea on to the worship leaders, because they are the ones that are carrying this focus or the distraction from this focus. So tell me a little bit about how that has become like a unique, not just, we should, train up other worship leaders. It's really a central theme in your ministry and life, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and it should be for every church. I hope that I started in worship ministry maybe like 15 years ago, and I remember when that was. I was at high school. I got involved in playing drums and then guitar, and then I started writing some songs, and then my mum got saved at a Billy Graham crusade, and soon after that I got saved. And so she got me plugged into the church, and I was playing guitar, and my church had a youth pastor, and he wanted to start a youth event. So he looked at me and he was like, "Hey, why don't you lead a couple of songs?" So I was like, "Oh, wow." So I practiced, and then and then he let me lead. And I remember that day like I'll never forget that day, because I remember coming off stage, walking off of the side stage, and seeing him and saying to him, "How did I do?" And he said to me,
"Wasn't I awesome?"
Yeah, right. And he said to me, as a classic artist, my emotions high, and I said to him, "How did I do?" And he said to me, "Well, you didn't do very well, but you're on again next month." And it was those two things right next to each other that, immediately, by the grace of God, even as a young guy, I thought, wow, that's, he was honest with me, but he was willing to then tell me that next month when we do this all again, you're back up, you're the guy. And even though I didn't know where that would lead me, and that simple thing has become a model for me, moving down the road as a worship leader, to find people who are wanting to be part of worship ministries, be part of leading people to worship and pulling them in. And often I think that sometimes we're looking for the person who's just as qualified or has just as much experience as we've had, and and if that person is less experienced, we're a little afraid to put them on stage. And I'm like, no, let's get these guys up on stage. They don't have to lead anything. For a number of years when I came here to Harvest, we were just one campus at that point. Well, now we're 7 campuses. There's plenty of opportunity for lots of people, but we were just one campus, and there was 2 of us worship leaders, and I got the joy of standing behind the guy that I was working for at that time as he led worship, and for me to watch him lead worship, and for me to grow in that. And some people ask me, "Hey, I want to become a worship leader. What school should I go to?" And I was like, well, there's plenty of great schools out there, but really the most important school that you could get involved in as a worship leader is your local church. Just get up on stage and start learning. You don't have to be singing anything. You could be playing acoustic guitar with it unplugged, for all I care. To get up there and participate and play along, and because I know that the day will come when I'll be wanting. I don't want the day to come where someone has to tell me to step down to make way for other people. I want to be the guy who chooses to do that, because I'm the guy who got that guy up on stage. I'm the guy who got that girl, in that position at our church, in the worship leadership, or that guy or girl playing piano, or as leaders, we're called to equip the saints, right, for good work. That's our directive, and equipping one another, and in a sense, kind of doing ourselves out of our job for the glory of God, you know. And so it's such a crucial part as well of the healthy life of the church, is to constantly be looking out into the body of the church and asking musicians, hey, do you want to be part of our ministry? Singers, do you want to be part of our ministry? Production people, hey, you the kind of guy who likes to, like, when your sound system breaks down, you're actually kind of, oh, I wonder if I can fix this. Well, you'd actually make a great person on our production ministry, because those are the kind of people that we're looking for, you know.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question, like, about the stage at church. The worship leader's position being, you know, in front of people. It does have an element that, you know, might attract the wrong kind of people as well. And so Absolutely. I guess what I'm asking is, it can't be just come one, come all, because you can end up with some people with the real wrong motivations who, you know, and there is an element, I think, where we need to just acknowledge that when you're in front of people and you got lights and you got a microphone, it feeds, you know, a part of our spirit that's like, hey, people like me, people want to hear me, people are listening to me, and and I guess what I'm asking is, as you're trying to call people out and make the ministry, you know, an inviting place, and yet how do you also guard that place as well? So tell me about that. Question.
Absolutely, I think. There's a number of answers I could give, but one of them is, when I'm looking at taking on a new guy, obviously, like, there's no way I'm going to put him up on stage unless I've spent a lot of time with him off stage first. And secondly, our church is a small group based church. It's a church based on discipleship and accountability. And if that's not rocking for someone before they even get up on stage, then I'm not interested in using them. And whether that happens through a small group or whether that happens through someone that I know that person is accountable to, like, that has to be happening first before they're ever going to get up on stage. Now, when they get up on stage, a small group doesn't prevent you from being up on stage and the sense in the flesh of just like, wow, I'm on stage and people are looking at me. But the constant accountability and discipleship in a person on the biblical and healthy role of a leader and someone who's trying to be an arrow and point people towards Jesus Christ and not point them towards themselves, happening off stage, massively helps them when they're on stage. And one has to precede the other, you know. So, but then, you know, what I've seen, I think sometimes is like, you know, someone will do a good interview, or someone will get in a small group, or they'll get in good accountability. Then they'll get up on stage, and then the person who got them up there just kind of turns away and starts working on the next person. And you can't do that. We have to constantly be asking ourselves. I have guys that I work with here on staff where we're constantly kind of keeping each other in check on our hearts and how much we're in God's Word and how much, you know, our new song that we wrote that's suddenly just taken off and our whole church is loving it. That we represented as, I love to say this, you know, we're like arrows, and we either point towards ourselves, we point towards kind of back at the congregation, which will be very horizontal, like, this is for you, we're doing this for you, but instead we're pointing upwards, we're pointing to the Lord, we're pointing to Him, and let our new songs and let our worship services and let any stage participation we do be pointing vertical toward God. And you know, I've said to some worship leaders, some guys have come up to me and said, kind of, how do you be like an invisible worship leader? And I tell them, well, you should go and work in Starbucks because you can be a worship leader there and tell people about Jesus there. But if you want to be a worship leader and you want to be on stage, well, the reason you're on a stage is because you need to be seen, and you need to be living your life in a way off stage so that when you get on stage, you know that you're an arrow pointing towards the Lord. And I want you to be the biggest arrow you can be. So for me, I'm totally an introverted personality. Like I will, like
really?
I'll read. Yes, absolutely. I will. My wife is extroverted and I'm introverted. Like she recharges like we go out and we hang out with people. That's recharging for her. Me is sitting at home watching a movie, being quiet, sitting there with a good British cup of tea, and that's recharging for me. But when I get on stage, well, that's not what God has called us to be if we're going to be on stage. Because I want people to look at me, and I don't want them to think, "Hey, nice song." I don't want them to think, "Hey, great voice," or anything like that. I want them to look at me and think, "I want what that guy has," because I'm trying to be as big a possible arrow as I can to point towards God. Because then when people see me and they see my excitement in wanting to worship God, and me having to be kind of a bit outside of myself get out of my introverted self to lead people to worship without being kind of a cheerleader about it, but being excited about being passionate about being joyful in the celebration that God has given us to use music to lead God's people to pray together with songs, then I'm going to be as big as I possibly can on that stage so that they will see me. And then when they see me and they think, I want what that guy has, then they won't see me anymore, in a sense. That's when the worship leader becomes, in a sense, invisible, when they're being an arrow and they're pointing, hey, I see an arrow. That arrow is pointing in a direction. So as soon as I see the arrow and that arrow's really big on stage, well, then I'll look towards the direction that the arrow is pointing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right.
And one of the ways I love that is when we use choirs. Like I love choirs because often I'll say to our choir in our rehearsal, hey, I have to stand up on stage every weekend and lead, and there's just one of me. Whereas there's 20, 30, 40, 50 of you. Well, you represent the corporate body you represent the corporate body 50 times more than I could as just one guy standing on stage.
Yeah.
So I want people to look at you and be like, hey, I want what they have. Then you'll be an arrow. Then you'll be pointing upwards. Then people will look up to see God.
It's a good image. That's what I love about choirs too. It's like, just taking a piece of the congregation and putting a mirror on the stage, and turning it into a circle. So.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming in, and people are obviously just interested in knowing some of the specifics about how your ministry, your worship ministry at your church really functions. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask some of their questions.
Sure.
One person was asking about auditions. So that's an interesting question. Just how does that idea fit in with your concept of, finding people, bringing them on stage, and because in the end, you want a sound that is amazing. You want people that can sing in tune and all that kind of stuff. So how does that all kind of filter in? If I come in, let's say for example, you got two guys in your church, and one guy, is a studio musician, and the other guy is, just knows how to play his instrument really well. But both of them want to get involved in your church. Right. What's their path?
Fantastic question. Well, they all go through the same channel. That's the first point, is that we have an application form. It's online. If anybody wants to go and look at it, it's just harvestbiblechapel.org/worship.
Yeah.
Harvestbiblechapel.org.
That's good for people to.
Yeah,
to
you
know.
can go and look at the application form. Now we've had 15-year-old kids who have been playing guitar for 4 weeks, and we've had Grammy award-winning vocalists who have attended our church, and they've both filled out the application form.
Okay, that levels the playing field then.
Yes, right. That's the first thing. And in that application form, we're asking people questions like, how long have you been attending our church? Because some people are like, oh, I don't attend your church, but I want to get involved in worship ministry. Well, this is not the place for you. This is not the place for you.
Yeah.
So how long have you been attending? Are you involved in a small group? Are you married? If so, is your spouse on board with you serving over a weekend? Because a lot of people work, well, a mass amount of people work, Monday through Friday, right? And then we're asking them to commit a whole bunch of hours over the weekend. So that's a massive important question for us. We want to see their spouse at the weekend. We want to see them not, while their husband or wife is participating on stage, we'd like them to come and hang out with us backstage, between the services. And then how long have you been playing your instrument? There's all these questions. It's going to lead towards that being submitted, and then someone calling them back and giving them an audition date. Now, if you are from a church that haven't had auditions for a while, but you have musicians serving in your worship ministry, you're going to have to lower the bar a little bit when your auditions come around, because your musicians have been getting used to the songs and the culture and the way that you're playing. And even a pro musician is going to know his thing, but it's going to be in a rut, and he's going to have to. He might be really skilled, like a session guy, but when he comes on board, well, you do things a certain way. So I found it as easy to get kind of, it's as easy to let myself get frustrated with the young guys as much as it is with the experienced pro musician, because I have to lower my bar a little bit to say, hey, if I'm going to allow people to come in, I've got to kind of just lower my expectations of the people that I'm bringing in here. Now, the way that we conduct these auditions is that we schedule everybody towards one date. Now, that might work out once a year for you. That might work out once every month for you. But what we do is we gather people in our church who are experienced musicians, or the people who have the most knowledge of the songs that you're playing and how you play them. And we will get together for a day, and we make up a band, basically. And so if Jim wants to come in and play bass, then he has a certain time that he turns up, and we've seen his application form, and we've given him 2 or 3 songs to practice specifically, and we've sent him the MP3s, and we've sent him the chord charts, and then he'll come in, and our bassist will step out, and Jim will step in, and he'll get to play along with the band, instead of him just coming and meeting with us in an office and us sitting there and be like, okay, now play something, This gives
so you got the whole band is there all day.
The whole band's there all day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
And
then I can step in and play my part with a band that knows what they're doing.
Yes. And
that's good.
It's all friendly faces that you've seen at church, and everybody's nice and welcoming to you. Now, the next stage is obviously like accepting someone or declining someone. And this is where like usually the artist like doesn't like to get involved, or doesn't know how to navigate this. And first things first, it's like if you're going to decline someone, you want to give them a reason as to why you're declining them. And that might be anything from they lied on their application. They said they were part of the church, and then you start talking with them, and they're not part of the church, or they say something that's a red flag, and you're like, so, but it might be their skill level or how unprepared they were. Maybe you want to give them a second chance, at an audition. We do that very often. We'll have people come in, and they might not be underprepared, but their skill level might be kind of like in a place where if we put them on a stage, it's not going to help them. It's not going to help them, but we want them to be in our ministry. So we say to them, hey, we're not closing the door on you. We just don't feel like this is the right time for you. Now, there's two roads you could go down here. So I'll go back to Jim. Say it's Jim playing bass, and his bass skills just kind of like, it's not low to the point where I haven't lowered my bar, and I'm just looking at all the other bassists in my church, and I'm being like, well, you're not as good as those guys, so therefore I'm not going to let you in. That's a mistake. I have to lower my bar a little bit, knowing that this guy is he's going to need to kind of pick up the pace a little bit on the way that we play. But that's why he wants to be involved. He probably wants to do that. But if he shows up and his skill level is kind of lower than that, and to the point where he really doesn't have a grasp of his instrument, that's where I'd say to him, hey, Jim, like, I want you to be in the ministry because this is your church, but this is not the right time for you to be in the ministry. And here are some specifics about the things that I heard you play that led me to this decision. And there's two roads you could take. Either you can re-audition in 6 months or a year from now, or what I prefer to do is while you continue to learn your instrument, I'd like to get you plugged into another ministry here at the church. Because I want to be part of a worship ministry that isn't exclusive, not just in the people that it lets in, but also too exclusive in the way that if someone comes in and they're not fit for worship ministry, then I'm just writing them off onto any ministry on the church. There's lots of ministries in the church that people can get involved in. And I've seen a number of times us turn someone away. I can think of an electric guitarist that we've had audition a number of times, and he ended up getting involved in a whole bunch of different ministries. Once I saw him out in the parking lot, like parking cars, and as I drove in, I thought, that's awesome, dude. Good for you, man. Good for you, And then he kept practicing. He kept his lessons up, and just this past year, we accepted him into the ministry.
Right.
Again, not because he's as good as our best electric guitarist. We definitely lowered the bar to allow him in.
Yeah.
But we let him in because now he was in a place where when he was on stage, we wouldn't be putting him in a place that would actually make him kind of hate playing, because
what I'm thinking as I'm listening to you is, when you turn someone away, or you say not right now, or offer them another position in another ministry, or anything like that, is really an opportunity for them to demonstrate the depths of their character, right? Which is ultimately what you want. But the guy that just gets accepted because he's amazing almost misses the ability to demonstrate, like, it's the guy that gets turned down and goes back and digs deeper and comes back again, or practices, or doesn't leave the church, or all of that. Those are the people that, in the end, you really want them, because they are really, like, they're the real deal,
Yeah.
So there's actually an opportunity in that experience. If you're auditioning and then you're turning someone away, I think, maybe just for people listening in who have been rejected, quote unquote, it's written all over the face of history, not just in music, but in business, and dreamers and inventors, and it's the people that got rejected that dug deeper and came back around, and those are the people that have transformed our world. You know,
You bet.
I mean, I heard just as one example, like I heard Colonel Sanders was turned down 1,000 times on his chicken recipe. You know, but it's like how many people would go 1,000 times, you know, committed to knowing they've got something or digging deeper or adjusting, and I think that's a message for us all to hear, whether you're on the leading side and giving someone an opportunity. Maybe that's even a message you could say is you know, the timing is not right now, but don't let this dissuade you. This is your chance to show your character, and then I suppose, you know, like you were saying, in the end with this electric guitar player, you ended up taking him not because he was necessarily more amazing than your other electric guitar player, but you knew he's got depth. Yeah, and that's what you're looking for. So that's good. It's good. And go ahead. You got another thing, and then I got another question.
No, go ahead. At some point, I wanted to just quickly touch on just like how the vertical philosophy of our worship planning looks like. You know, because that's something I talked a lot about with Charlene. And
yes. Well, let's go there right now, and you know, I'll steer you in directions that make everyone satisfied and feel like their questions are answered. So, but I want to hear that. I'm eager to know about. So go ahead. Tell us about.
Sure. Well, one of the I feel the reason I want to kind of jump in on that today is just because it's, you know, it's vertical church, vertical worship. What does that look like in our weekend services? You know, what does that look like as a worship planner? And this is something that I'm really passionate about. It's like I've really seen the fruit of this over the years that I've been at Harvest, and I was leading worship in the UK for a number of years before I ever came out here, and I'd often get off stage and I'd ask myself, like, why did I feel like I hadn't arrived at a destination? And when I came out here to Harvest, we started talking a lot about the destination in worship, like where we're going in worship. And when you think about destinations, like our life is just consumed by destination. When I got up this morning, you know, I came to work. That, like, I didn't turn up at some random office block. I came here to the place that I work, and when I go to lunch, I'll go somewhere today that sells food. And when I go home, I'll go back to my house. You know, just, you know, there's just constant destination. If you look at everything in your day, you're just like, you know, the coffee pot is in the break room. Like there's just whether it's small or large, like our lives are consumed with destination. And when you come to church, you go to a church, you go to that church all the time. And when you go, and then often people sit in exactly the same places in the worship center. You know, they have a destination even in the worship center. They come in and they often sit in the same seat. You know, I can often spot people just instantly, you know, because I'm like, oh yeah, you always sit there, right? Just destination. Well,
hey, you're in my seat. You're in my seat.
Right. So often that track of destinations can stop at the point where the worship service begins, and we need to ask ourselves, hey, for the chief end event of a Christian's week, where are we going? What are we leading to? And so we started to unpack the content of what we're participating in, what we're hearing every weekend at church. And we started to look at our songs, and we started to break down the content of our songs, and started to look at Scripture and say, hey, the destination as a believer is heaven. And in heaven, the content of our worship is vertical. It's ascribing worth to God. It's holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory. It's those in heaven and on earth and under the earth join together and say, blessing, honor, glory, power to you forever and ever and ever. Amen. And so one of the songs in our set that do that, and okay, so let's gather those songs together. Now, when people come into the service at the beginning of the worship time, what songs could we be singing? Well, there's songs like Brenton Brown's song, Praises Rising. Praises Rising, eyes are turning to you, we turn to you. Those songs are like gathering songs. Okay, so let's get all our gathering songs together. Now we're left with this whole chunk of songs in the middle that has an interesting similarity about all these songs. Well, these songs speak about us. They speak about God, but what He's doing in our lives. So I'll give you another example. A song like "You Never Let Go" by Matt Redman. He's written right out of Scripture, but he's saying, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, oh no, you never let go. You never let go of me. And so when we started to plan our services, we were like, hey, why don't we plan in a way that drives toward that vertical place, So we'll start categorizing our songs, and we'll put them, our gathering songs, we'll call them ones. We're going to have 5 groups of songs, and our ones can be gathering songs, and our threes can be like real testimonial songs, like "You Never Let Go," that speak about what God is doing in my life, and then our 5 songs can be our vertical scripted ones. And let's just make sure that every weekend when we're ascending the hill of the Lord, as the psalmist says, like we are getting to the top of the hill. Now this brings a whole bunch of things to mind. I'll be quick on this, but as a worship leader, I see myself as, I talked earlier about kind of being like an arrow. Well, I'm talking about being like a tour guide. If you've ever been on a tour, I've been on a tour. I've been on a bunch of tours. Probably the best one I ever went on was to Israel. And our tour guide, her name was Irit. And she was a lovely little kind of 4-foot woman, that knew tons about all the places that we were going to. But what was really interesting is I never came home with a photo of Irit. Never came home with a photo of her. Because she did the best job of leading me and pointing me towards the destination every time. And when I saw the destination that we were going to, my mind was blown, and the last thing I thought was, hey, let's get a photo of this and let's get the tour guide in the photo. No. And so when we plan our services, often the worship leader at the beginning of a worship set needs to call people to worship and command attention and say, hey, come and worship the Lord with me. Come. Let's sing this song about preparing our hearts for worship. But as that progression starts to go through 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, by the time we end up at the 5 where it's vertical scriptive songs, let me give you some examples for those. A song like Revelation Song by Jenny Lee Riddle, or How Great Is Our God by Chris Tomlin. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great, how great, how great is our God. The splendor of the King, He's robed in majesty. A song on our CD called All Glory is a 5. And actually I got involved in the track listing of our CD, and I put the first 5 tracks of the CD as a 1 through 5.
Really?
So
open the heavens.
Open up the heavens. Yeah, we've waited for this day. We're gathered in your name, calling out to you.
Yeah.
You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. And then when you move towards the 3, which would be a song like Not for a Moment, if you switch to that one, it's a song about God working in me. You were reaching through the storm, walking through the water, even when I could not hear. After all, you are constant, you're good. Not for a moment will you forsake me. Will you forsake me?
Yeah.
And it's important that we sing these songs, these testimonial songs, in our worship. But I know as a worshiper that if I walk into a church, if I went and visited a church, and they're wanting me to sing, you were reaching through the storm, walking on the water, even when I could not hear it. Now, my mouth will sing that, but I know my heart's not there yet because I just dropped my kids off. You know, I was talking about finances with my wife as we're walking into the worship center, and now the worship leader is putting a lyric like that in my mouth. No. I want my worship leader to be calling me to worship first, to be preparing my heart so that I can get to that place of singing, God, not for a moment will you forsake me. Now, a question that someone might have is, well, how does that look like? Do you always plan 1 through 5? No, not at all. We don't go into a meeting and just write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up on the board. Like if we have a testimony, if we have a baptism service, when the person gets baptized, they spend 4 minutes in the baptistry, and 4.5 seconds of that is being baptized, or else they're going to drown. And so what's the rest of that time spent doing? It's that person giving their testimony about God's faithfulness. It's exactly what they're giving over the lyrics to exactly what not for a moment usually is. And so we would plan a service by gathering people to worship with a song, putting a 2 and a 4 in. And what I mean by that is that the 1s are gathering songs, the 3s are testimonial songs, the 5s are scripted vertical songs, and the 4s and the 2s are transitioning between those. So 1, 2, a 2 example would be Blessed Be Your Name, on the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering, blessed be your name. Like it's an upbeat tempo song, but it's something I can't necessarily get right into. And then a 4 would be a song like Your Name by Paul Baloche. The verse sings, when morning dawns and evening fades, you inspire songs of praise. Rise from earth to touch our hearts and glorify your name. And then the chorus goes vertical. Your name is a strong and mighty tower. Your name. And so, so we've got baptisms here. So baptisms are testimonial. So let's take out the 3 song and let's put the baptisms in its place. You know, now, last thing is that go back to the hill analogy, and we're ascending the hill of the Lord every weekend. Now, the most important thing as a tour guide, when we ascend, when we lead our people, come and worship the Lord, come to the Holy of Holies, whatever visual picture you want to have in your head, people ascending up the hill into the outer courts, you know, into the Holy of Holies, is that you get them there to the Holy of Holies. How you get them there, there's 1,000 routes to get up the hill. There's 1,000, there's 1,000,000. There should be even more, because God is, like I said earlier, God is creator God who created us to be creative. So there should be a number of ways to get up, just as long as we arrive in a place where our eyes are off of ourselves, where our mouths are not speaking of us anymore, but we've turned our attention fully to God, to something that we'll be experiencing in heaven, where our hearts will be bowed down low, but our hands will be lifted high, and our voices will be saying, all glory to you, God. Holy, holy, holy. You're worthy of that. It's not about us anymore. It's about you. Yeah. So that's a picture of kind of what our worship services look like every week. And if you came to our church week after week, you wouldn't feel like we're in a rut, because we pick a different way to get up the top of the hill every week. But the point is that we get the people to the top of the hill every week.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking in terms of destination, that is the destination that you have in mind.
And often when I look back, I mean, this was kind of still being evolved when I came here to Harvest, but when I looked back at my years in the UK, where I didn't have a concept in mind of leading people towards a destination, I'd often lead them to a point where the worship set would finish about singing about us instead of singing about God. Now, I want to put a big disclaimer on this. If I go to someone's church and they don't ascribe to that philosophy, do I worship God? Of course I worship God. Of course I worship God. Of course I worship God. But we're ascribing to a philosophy where we believe that the destination of worship is beyond singing about ourselves. It's singing, and we get an opportunity to do that, but we arrive in the destination where we're no longer singing about ourselves, and we're just ascribing pure vertical content to God.
Yeah. So you were saying you have all your songs that you use in your church. Do you literally have a sheet where you have identified, are these a 1, a 3, or a 5? Is that
yes?
Does it get that specific for you?
Yes,
I wonder
absolutely.
if that's something. I'm just thinking maybe you could share that
absolutely
with me, or we could maybe post a little blog in our site and say, here's 10 songs that are ones, and just to give people a flavor of what that looks like.
Yeah,
I'd love
to. I have that list, and I also have a bit more of a kind of a simplified list with because ours kind of it has all the crazy things that we do in house here. That like there'll be a song in there, you'll just be like, what is that song? That's something that one of us wrote that we've sung a couple of times. But I've put a list together that's a bit more kind of that anybody could look at and be like, oh, okay, right, I understand that. And
I get it. Yeah.
And when we categorize the songs, we categorize them by lyric and not by style. So content and style are both important. I want to make that clear. Content and style are both important. But in a fist fight, I say content is always going to win.
Yeah.
So
it's not necessarily fast songs to start, slow songs.
Correct. But what's a really interesting observation is once you start categorizing your 1 through 5s, or however you would want to do it, gathering, testimonial, ascriptive, it's interesting to see that the gathering songs tend to be up tempo, and the tempo starts to gradually, by average, start to slow down as you get more ascriptive, which is fine. That's fine,
But it's not necessary. It can be a very beautiful thing to start a service in a quiet, reflective kind of mode, and and almost reverse it. It's like you could do a quiet opening song and a joyful vertical song or whatever.
Right.
That wouldn't be hard anyways. There's lots of great celebration songs that point to God. But it's good to just be thinking about what is the theological framework that the lyric of this song is saying, as far as gathering or things like that. So definitely I would say if you can help us get even more specific with that, we'll post some follow-up blogs here, and I'm even thinking, if you have a couple of worship service, plans that you could just here's what an actual service looks like. Absolutely. That we've done, and obviously there's going to be some unique, special things to your church, but I think many of us are just interested in how does this actually work? What does it look like? Sure. In a very practical kind of way. So we're getting to the end of our time here, and I don't want to take too much longer, but I have a number of questions, and I don't want to leave people feeling like, well, I asked a question and he didn't even answer it. So I'm going to extend this now just a few minutes. I'm going to ask you some questions, but I'm going to ask you this: you can go on for 15 minutes per question. Right. And then let's all go through all the questions, so everybody gets their questions answered, and you can take a minute or so on each one. Okay. All right. So someone's Brad says, can you list out? Oh, he says, can you list out the numbers he's talking in definitions? Sorry, I'm reading these questions as I'm going. So
No,
I think we were talking about that.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
We're going to get specific on that. And Randy is asking, how do you introduce new songs to the congregation?
Great question. Here's the answer. So,
go ahead.
So we have an offering every week, and during that offering we play a song while the offering's being taken. That's the spot that we would teach a new song. We teach probably, there's only 52 weekends a year, so like 5, the max 10 new songs a year, and probably only 3 or 4 of those songs actually make it. And
wow.
And what I mean is we'll the reason being is that we want our church to not be constantly singing stuff that they don't have ownership over. So some of the songs in our repertoire, like people are like, man, I remember when our church went through that season and we sang "Blessed Be Your Name." That was the song of the season. And so yeah, that song will eventually go away. But we don't want to just be like done with the season, done with the song. But back to teaching, we will teach it the first week in that spot, and when I see that the offering bags have gone all the way to the back, I will then ask the people to stand for the remainder of the song. Then the next week, and participate in it, and then the next week we will teach the song in the worship set. If it's a gathering song, I'd probably actually sing a gathering song, one that's really familiar, just to get people kind of engaged, and then I'd put it in as the 2, And then, so first week is in the offering, second week we teach it, third week we rest the song, and then the 4th week we play it again, and then we decide on that 4th week. And if we're looking at
when you
crowd,
say
we're looking at the crowd.
I was just going to ask, when you say you teach it, like, do you literally say, okay, repeat after me, or what do you mean when you say you teach it? You don't just
usually I just call it.
Yeah,
I would just call it as it is. Hey, here's a new song we want to teach to you. So follow along, and then we'll sing. Yeah. We'll sing on that first week. We'll sing at least a couple of verses and a couple of choruses before. On that first week, I might even leave out the bridge to the song and just put the bridge in the following week. And at the once the offering bags have gone to the back, and the offering's over, I'll say to people, okay, stand with me, and we'll sing a couple more choruses together. And usually in that first week, you get a really good idea of whether people are connected with the song. And this is a point where the worship leader needs to connect with the senior pastor and be very, very honest about what the response was, because we need. This is a really, really important part. This might be the most important thing I've said the whole hour. We need to love the people more than the music.
Right.
We need to love the people more than the music. So if it doesn't serve the people, but we love the song is out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard when you're a worship leader and you really like a song and you
bet.
Like, I want people to like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. So, and John is asking, just related to this, what the process is for picking your songs. So he's asking in general, picking your songs and then picking the songs from week to week. And I'm just thinking, if you're only introducing 10 new songs a year and, 3 or 4 or 5 of them actually make it, it's like you're passing up on a lot of really great music, because there's a lot of great songs being written that would be so hard to just go, oh, I would love to do that, but we just can't. Right.
But also, like, our churches are not meant to be musical showcases of the new worship songs out there, So for the 10 songs that actually make it to the platform, we've listened to 50 or 60, but we get together as a group. Now we have a worship staff here made up of 9 people or so, because we're a multi-campus church. We have 7 campuses across Chicago, and we all plan our services together. So when we find a new song, someone will bring it to the group, and we'll listen to it, and we'll all vote on it together. And if half the group, thumbs down on the song is out. And we've developed a culture where, that, well, it's never not going to hurt, right, if you bring the song and it kind of gets thrown out. But the value is that everybody has to deliver that on their campus. And so if half the people don't like the song, it's not serving the worship leaders who have to own the song for themselves to then teach the congregations to own it themselves. But that said, when I plan a worship service, do I love every song in the worship set? No, I don't. I'm not going to tell you which ones I like more than others, right? But no, I don't. Yeah. I don't love that particular song, but it serves our people.
Yeah.
And it might be
you know
something.
What? I think as a worship pastor, in the end, you really love the songs that serve the people, because
Amen.
There's no greater joy than just knowing
Amen.
that people are engaging. I mean, I'd sing a song I didn't like if I saw all the hands in the air and people shouting out, or on their knees or whatever. That's what we live for, right?
Yeah.
Is that serving? So, okay, I have another question here, and you'll be tempted to go along on this, but
I'll go short.
I'm interested myself. Is we have a lot of people listening who span the theological spectrum from conservative right through to charismatic. Right. And I don't know, what you consider yourself, like, are you a charismatic church or a conservative, or you're not even on that grid or whatever. But Christine is just asking, how would you compare the vertical church concept to the current charismatic movement in the UK? And she says she's asking because many Bible-teaching good conservative churches in the UK are afraid of this type of concept that talks about changing lives, the power of the Spirit, etc. So, I want you to talk to, there's a whole sphere of the church that it's not their natural thing to, have 500 hands in the air and, and right. all that kind of thing. They're from a conservative mindset, but it's not that they don't want to engage with God, but speak to those people. Is this for them, or is this just for the charismatic church?
No, it's definitely not. It's not identified or by charismatic or conservative. And firstly, to answer your question, I think Harvest has some charismatic side to it, but definitely not in a way that you would walk in and think, oh, this is a charismatic church. And in the same way, you wouldn't walk in and be like, oh, this is a really conservative church. Often I've heard the term, contemporary without compromise thrown in. Like we are, we're trying to be a church full of fresh life, preaching the word without apology, but with passionate worshipers too. Because my senior pastor gets up on stage and often says, I don't preach to make you better listeners, I preach to make you better worshipers. So that, therefore, if he's driving his preaching towards people being passionate about worshiping God, then we're going to be passionate in our worship service about worship God. Now, to answer Christine's, I know Christine, and I know what church she's at, and
I didn't even say her last name, but
Yeah, no, I know who she is. So, and hey, Christine, but I would get on such a rabbit trail with that answer that I can give one great answer, and this isn't going to be like a pushback answer. The answer is you have to read the book. The book is going to answer the question for you. But I can answer the question offline too, because I'll go on the rabbit trail about book. I've read the book myself. And what I'd love to do also is...
Sorry, you're saying the book as in the Vertical Church book.
The Vertical Church book.
Not like... I thought you were maybe referencing the Bible as the
No,
book?
no. Obviously read the Bible. That's a given. Yeah, but then like 100 million steps down from that, read the vertical church.
The small B book, not the big B book.
Yes, the small B. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so that tells the story.
But as an encouragement,
yeah,
I've just been on 21 different dates where people have come in, both charismatic and contemporary, to the far end degrees. And I have seen this message preached, and it's not the messenger, it's not James MacDonald. It's the power of God's word that's being preached, and it's a cry that people in their churches would rend the heavens and come down. That God would rend the heavens and come down, and I have seen both sets of people come together through the bonding of God's word being preached, and go back to their churches. So it's not a thing for one group or another at all.
Yeah. That's really encouraging to hear. And I think, just listening, because I kind of personally consider myself a charismatic conservative. I can't put myself in any camp. I don't know, who wouldn't want the best of both, God's Spirit and His Word, and so I think the church is longing for that. Like when I say the church, the big C, the worldwide church, we don't want to sit divided in our camps, and yet we want something more. And we've seen a lot of kind of kooky movements come and go in the last 100 years, and people are on guard, and rightly so. So, it's we want the real thing.
Yeah.
And so, there's more, but we got to stop somewhere, and people have been very engaged and listening in, and I want to bring this to a close, but just say in kind of wrapping, we are going to post a couple extra blogs after this, just to give some helpful resources like that list of songs. And of course, we have a lot of great resources for those songs in praise charts, and we'll make those available, as well as just in this last hour, we've actually been loading all the charts to your vertical album and the listening party. People can listen to these songs and now kind of hear with that perspective of what the sort of theological purpose of all that the music is and how it fits in. And are you going to be recording more like this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've already started writing, and that's another thing. We've written like probably 20, 25 songs now. We've got there's probably 4 of them that I would say are probably going to make the next record. So we've still got a way to go. But we're writing as an act of worship to God, not making records as the chief act. The act of worship is in the writing, and so we're just enjoying the writing process, and also just to add on to what you said, I would love to make myself available to anybody who has questions too, and I'm no rock star that's like inaccessible to reach. We have a Harvest Bible Chapel website. My address is on there, and I would love, one of my favorite things, just being in part of ministry and having the job that I have, is to connect with worship people and worship leaders, musicians, singers, anything. And if people want to contact me, call me, or ask any questions, I'm more than happy to talk out some of the things that we talked about today, or answer any more questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Man, we need people like you, people that are interested in passing the torch and multiplying themselves. And so thank you for inspiring all of us with
my pleasure, man. We're all shoulder to shoulder, right? There's no ranks.
Yes.
There's no ranks.
Yeah.
So God's on His throne, and we're all shoulder to shoulder. So I'm happy to help out in whatever way I can. So
right on.